Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, a Gawker reporter had his entire online presence hacked and all his devices wiped. We'll walk you through the details on this crazy attack and why it might suggest that we're facing some fundamental challenges. Plus, we've got a whole batch of your questions and our answers. All that and a heck of a lot more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. This is episode 70, and this episode is brought to you by GoDaddy.com, and I'll tell you more about them as the show goes on. And the live stream is powered by ScaleEngine.com, which is really incredible. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the tech, the admin, and the teacher, Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey Chris, everybody, thanks for watching.
Dude, 70 weeks in a row, we didn't miss a beat. That's
pretty impressive, honestly.
When we got to 50, I thought, okay, we can knock it off. But now that we're at 70, I think all obligations are off. We could miss like 3 weeks, and people will still not think we're dead. You know, we've like reached that spot now where if we were to like have some sort of podcast catastrophe where we went off the air, a lot of times people freak out and think the show's done. But I think after 70 in a row, people would have faith that we'd be back. We're like powerhouses. In fact, this streak I predict won't be broken until you're going to the BSD convention, because then we'll pre-record one ahead of time while you're gone.
Because I'll be gone for quite a few days. And
that'll be like
after the early, because it's a 12-hour flight and all that fun stuff.
That'll be like in October, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and people should email Alan.
I think it'll be just after episode 80.
Send in your emails to techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com if you want to meet up with Alan while he's over at the BSD. Is it what's the name of it?
It's Euro BSD Con.
There you go. So Alan will be chatting with folks.
I'm giving the last talk on the second day.
Well, there you go. So
a fault-aware load balancer, a fault-aware global server load balancer in DNS.
Oh, cool. You know, actually, you've talked about fragments of that on the show, haven't you? Like
a little bit.
Yeah.
And probably we'll do a bit more as I finish writing the talk I'm giving.
Totally. Good man. Might as well, if you're going to spend the effort, might as well use it in both avenues.
Well, if it's what I'm thinking about that day, then that's what goes in the show.
Yeah, and it's extremely interesting stuff.
EuroBSDCon will be in Poland this year.
Cool. Man, I wish I could go.
The Euro one moves around every year. The Canadian one is always in Ottawa.
Okay. That would be a lot of fun. All right, well, before we jump into our first story, which is probably, it's huge. It kind of goes back, too, to one of the things where TechSNAP, when Alan and I were originally kicking around before we even went on air, was one of the things we wanted to do with really big news events that happen in the technology industry, and then later, especially when they kind of converge with security news, is we really wanted to go deep analysis of something that happened, because a lot of times people out of the gate report on something, give you all the surface details, and then kind of move on. Whereas this show, we really wanted to actually, have fun with those details and dig into things. Before we go to that, I made a mention of it at the end of last week's episode, but guess what? Jupiter Broadcasting now has official Chrome and Firefox plugins in their respective extension stores, and awesome. It's a great way to just add that to your browser, and then when you're shopping at one of our affiliate sites, it'll automatically tag your shopping session to support Jupiter Broadcasting, and that's how you can contribute directly to these shows to keep us on the air while you get yourself something. So thank you to everybody. You can search for Jupiter Broadcasting in their stores, or you just go to the very bottom of jupiterbroadcasting.com. We've got links to both the Firefox and the Chrome extension. Thanks to Rikai in the chat room for putting those together, too.
Yes.
All right, Alan, what is the first and the big story this week?
Right. So Matt Hanone, who's a reporter for Gawker and also formerly the editor of Wired, basically got his entire online presence hacked.
Yeah, big time.
And his entire digital life destroyed, basically.
Yeah, he suffered a pretty significant outage that I worry could happen to a lot of people. I mean,
yes, basically, I'm going to walk you through what seems like a very complex process, but when you look at it more abstractly, you're like, wow, somebody just strung all these little bits of information together and managed to totally wipe out this person.
And the scary part is there's not uncommon services and where they got the information and things like that.
Yeah, basically the same stuff could happen to almost anyone.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Even people who follow really good security best practices. All right, so where do we start?
Partly anyway, yeah. So a hacker going by the pseudonym of Phobia originally targeted Matt Hanone for his Twitter account because he has Twitter username MAD, right? Just a nice short 3-letter Twitter username. And those are nice to have.
Yeah.
So the @Matt Twitter account was linked, when you went to it, it had a link to Matt's personal website. So they went there and they got from that his Gmail address because it was on his website. Right? And you can just assume from that the email address for his Twitter account is that Gmail address, right? Because almost everybody's is.
Yeah.
So then you look at, all right, so if we want to take over this Twitter account, all we have to do is reset the Twitter password into this Gmail account. So now we have to figure out how to get control of this Gmail account.
Right, which is something you and I have pointed out on the show often is if your Gmail account isn't secure and people reset your passwords and they have your Gmail account already, those land in your inbox.
Yeah, once they get your email, they can own your life.
Yeah.
And so the hacker then went to Gmail and started the password recovery process at Gmail. Now, since the Gmail account there wasn't set up for two-factor authentication, the reset option you get is to send a new password to the alternate email address that you have configured in Gmail.
Right.
So when you sign up for a Gmail, you put in your existing email address. That way, if you ever lose access to your Gmail, they'll email your new password to your old email address.
Right.
Now, when they do this, they tell you the old email address, but they don't give all of it to you because that would make it easier for you to compromise in a chain like this, right? So the address that you have as your backup in Gmail is displayed, but they star out most of the letters just to give you enough for you to know which of your email accounts it was. Because if you set up your Gmail like 6 years ago when I did, you might not remember what your which account you tied it to.
Yeah, exactly.
So then you have to go find that email address. Well, so another thing is it's important to make sure you keep that up to date. If you stop using an email address, you want to make sure that your Gmail points to an address you can actually get access to.
Yeah.
But also, if you have it set up to some email service where names eventually expire, someone could register that name and then have access to your Gmail account that way.
It's like if it's been a few years or something like that, they could come back and reclaim the old account.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
if it was a domain you used to own that expired and isn't registered anymore and all kinds of things.
Right. That does happen. Yeah.
But it ends up showing up as M and then a bunch of stars, n@me.com. So it doesn't really give you much of the email address, except for just by looking at it, you can see that basically the username part of the email address is identical to the username part of the Gmail address, right? His first initial and his last name at gmail.com, and his backup address is his first letter of his name and his last name at me.com. So from that, the hacker was able to guess what his me.com email address was.
Yeah, sure.
So now, in order to reset the password of the Gmail address, he needs to gain access to the Apple address, right? Because me.com is iCloud. So in order to reset the password for an Apple ID, the attacker normally needs to answer an account's secret questions.
Yeah, sure.
However, people often don't remember the answers to the secret questions or never set secret questions or whatever. So Apple, as a fallback method, will take just your billing address and the last 4 digits of your credit card number that you have on file.
Yeah, I think, I've had a TV provider that did it like that. Like a DirecTV or something, or a Dish.
Yeah, or, I think my ISP is like, they want like your postal code or something easy to look up on Google Maps. And, they're usually awfully useless security questions. But that's the second topic for the show.
Okay.
Anyway, so Apple only requires the billing address and the last 4 digits of the credit card that's on file for the iCloud account. Now, a billing address is fairly easy to come by, right? You can look someone up in a phone book or a white pages or whatever. In this case, they used the address that was on the blog domain, right? When he registered his domain, he didn't do the domain privacy thing, and so his address was there. Or, there's people searches. Someone might, on a blog post, put their address even inadvertently, just was talking about stuff that happened in their neighborhood or whatever, and, a bunch of different things like that.
Sure.
And then the other thing, but the last 4 digits of your credit card are a little harder to get than, somebody's address.
Yeah, so it kind of makes sense that might be something they would pick on the surface, yeah.
Although we'll get to why the last 4 digits of your credit card number are not always that secure.
Okay.
So now the hacker needs, he's got the address from a whois, but he needs the last 4 digits of the victim's credit card number in order to reset the Apple account, in order to reset the Google account, in order to reset the Twitter account.
Right. Wow. Island hopping extreme.
Yeah. Now, since the hacker knew the victim's email address, the next target to get a credit card was Amazon.
Ah, yeah, sure. Everybody's got an Amazon account.
Right. So the attacker had an associate of his call up Amazon and claim to be the victim. And what the victim claimed was that they wanted to add a new credit card to his account. So you call up Amazon and say, I want to add a new credit card to my account. That process only requires knowing the account holder's name and the billing address.
Okay.
Right? And then you just add a new credit card. Because, adding a new credit card to your account doesn't really seem like a high-risk operation.
Right, it's just a form of payment. You're just funding, essentially.
Well, yeah, you're adding a credit card. You're not asking what your existing credit card is.
Right.
You're just saying, I want to add this new credit card.
Yeah.
And it seems to make sense for companies to want to make that process as easy as possible and not ask you a bunch of security questions in order for you to give them a new credit card.
So they want you to spend.
Right. But in that case, they probably should have some tighter security to keep you from...
putting a fraudulent credit card on there.
Right.
Like that.
So in this case, the trick is after you call Amazon and add this new credit card, then you call back and talk to someone else at Amazon and say that you've forgotten your password. And then you just need to provide your account holder's name, the billing address, and the current credit card, which you just added.
Right. Okay.
With this information, to verify your identity, you can then change the email address on the account and have the password reset.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty clever. You got to have a little bit of understanding of how Amazon systems work, but probably not that uncommon.
Something there is what Amazon could do is not allow that credit card to be used to reset the account if it was added to the account less than 20 days ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? If it's added today, then that's obviously suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
Although at the same time, someone hasn't used their Amazon in a while, they call up to add a credit card, and then they're like, oh, I can't actually order because I forgot my password as well.
Right.
So,
that's true. It could be.
You need to know the number of your older credit card in order to reset your password.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that was a problem I had with my ISP. They asked me for the credit card number I used when I signed up with them, which was 5 years ago. Don't have that credit card anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I have no idea what the bloody number is.
No way. Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm the same exact way.
The credit card replaced with new numbers like 3 times since then.
Oh yeah, totally, absolutely.
It is, yeah.
Huh.
That was anyway.
So, all right.
Yeah. So now they had access to the Amazon account, right? Because they just changed the email address over to something they controlled, reset the password, log into Amazon. You go into your order history or your account settings there, and you can see a list of all the credit cards in the account. Now, they don't give you the whole credit card number, but they do give you the first 4 and last 4 digits, so you can tell which of the credit cards is which.
Oh, there you go.
Almost everybody does that, and it's considered perfectly fine to do that.
Yeah.
Because I need to know which, like your PayPal account does the same thing. Because if I have 3 credit cards in my PayPal account, I need to know which one's which so that I can, right, this is the one I need to change, or this is one I want to remove, or this is what I want the charge to go to.
Yeah. Jeez. So, and if Apple only requires those last 4 digits.
Yes. Maybe Apple should require the middle set of 4 or something.
Yeah.
Just something other than the last 4 because
you're at a lot of online services list
almost everything lists those by the last 4 credit cards.
Yeah.
Like I think even a lot of receipts will have the last 4 digits of your credit card on them.
I wonder if that's actually why they picked them, because it was like not considered a confidential question, like asking for a social security number might be, or something like that.
Or even, in order to check your whole credit card number, they would have to have access to that. And maybe PCI compliance reasons, they only store...
I'm sure.
They store the last 4 digits not encrypted so that they can look them up as just a support agent.
Right, I would imagine.
That might be why they do it, but it also means that it's not a very secure bit of information.
Yeah. Which makes it a bad choice for that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, now that they had that from Amazon, they take that information in hand, call up AppleCare, and reset the password for the Apple ID, which gives them access to the iCloud account and the @me.com address of the victim.
Right.
So then they can reset Google, and then they can reset Twitter. And then they go to town by posting nasty stuff on the Twitter account. And also, coincidentally, it allowed them to gain access to Gawker's Twitter account because Matt's account was authorized on it.
Jeez.
Yeah, so that was extra embarrassing. Now, if you want to prevent your victim from interfering with your actions after you take over their account, right? If you had just done this, then the victim could reset their Twitter account again and regain control of it.
Sure.
So if you want to prevent your victim from interfering with your evil plans, what you do is disable their ability to fight back. So in this case, the attacker used iCloud's Find My service, which is an opt-in thing. So it's not on by default, but most people do opt into it, which is designed for finding your
lost Apple device or stolen. Yeah.
Your lost or stolen Apple device.
Yeah.
But basically, the attacker used that service to initiate a remote wipe of the victim's iPhone, iPad, and MacBook.
Of course.
And as part of that process, it also locks the devices with a PIN defined by the person that initiates the wipe. So,
that's horrible.
The only way to cancel it is with this 4-digit PIN that only the attacker had.
So, I'll tell you, I have this ability turned on the iPad that I have and on the MacBook that I have for editing. I have that turned on because I figure if one of them ever walks away, I want to wipe them.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's free. I just figure why not. But yeah, it makes you realize how you start with an account and then companies add these features that give these online services more and more power, and now you've got a cloud quote unquote service that can actually wipe your machine, and that's a lot of power that just kind of got rolled in as a feature.
Yeah, it doesn't require any like 2-factor authentication, and it doesn't require a confirmation on the device.
Well, because the idea is it could be stolen, right? You don't want the hacker or attacker to be able to say, no, don't wipe.
Right. But, maybe you need to have something extra in there to just like, are you very sure you want to wipe your device?
Like if you initiate the request from a browser, maybe you have to confirm it from like the other smart device that's connected to your account. Right. So you have to when they blow up the Enterprise, the captain and the first officer have to enter in the destruct code. You can't just have the captain do it. Mm-hmm. Unless it's Voyager and they just get rid of that rule. But you know what I'm saying. It's a very powerful feature and one that like users want, but boy, that can sure be turned against you. So he's left without any tools he just has to sit here and let it all happen.
Basically. And then the next step was to delete the Gmail account. Which, because it's Gmail, the option was to delete the entire Google account. Gmail, G+, YouTube, Blogger, the whole thing, right?
So that means his Docs, his Google Voice.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So that the Google account couldn't be used to regain control of the Twitter account. Now, normally you're able to undelete a Gmail account. However, it requires an extra verification step. In this case, I think it was a text message to be sent to the cell phone, which couldn't be accessed because it had been erased and locked with a PIN.
Yeah.
And so the victim hadn't regained control of their phone in order to unlock their Gmail or to undelete their Gmail account.
Jeez, wow.
Yeah.
Now, I read that they actually ended up recovering data on the laptop, though. But it got wiped initially.
The wipe got interrupted by a hard power down or something before it got far enough to overwrite the data.
Okay.
So it wasn't,
So he must have seen that come up on the screen. He's like, power, no.
Yeah. So there's, it's not clear how much of the data is going to be recoverable, but at least some of it.
Okay.
So, all of this points out that the serious weak link in most all security systems are people. And the ways around the security system we put in place for when people forget their passwords or other stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's like, requiring all this fancy stuff to get into a secure building like an office, right? You need like a smart card and a PIN code or something to get into an office. Mm-hmm. But if you just like wave hi to the guard and be like, oh, I forgot my card at home, can you let me in? And he lets you in without checking who you are. Mm-hmm. What's the point of having the PIN code and the swipe card?
Yep.
Yeah. So as we've seen in other cases like this, like if we remember one from Australia where they managed to socially engineer the phone company into moving the guy's phone number to a different phone.
Oh, yes.
And then hacking his online banking and through the SMS message approving a large transfer of money.
Right.
With the same basic personal information like billing address, the last 4 digits of the credit card, and anything else they could have gathered from all this stuff, they may have been able to do that to his phone and to move his cell phone number to a different machine or a different phone so that they could receive, say, that reset from Google, or make it harder for him to receive that reset from Google.
Right.
But it just means it might have been possible for them to manage the reset of Google, even if he had two-factor authentication, where Google would have made them enter a code that was sent to the cell phone in order to reset the password. Because if they could manage to steal the phone number for the cell phone using the same bit of information and the same social engineering technique they used against Apple and Amazon against a phone company, they may have been able to even defeat two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
If two-factor authentication is just a text message.
Right.
Depends. Some have specific,
like Google's Authenticator is an app.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Way back originally, it wasn't. It was just a text message of like a four-digit code.
Yep.
But now there's an app, it binds to the individual device, and it's it takes work to bind it to a different device and so on. But it does mean they could have intercepted verification text messages for other services like the Gmail or even online banking, right?
And I think Twitter has a text message type reset thing too. They'll send you a text if you have your phone number associated with Twitter.
Right. So if the attackers had been after more than just the guy's Twitter account, they could have probably executed this attack against his online banking information if they could have garnered enough of the information.
He got lucky. I mean, really, if they were going after his Twitter account, which at the time had like 17,000 followers or something like that, I don't know.
They just wanted it for the short username.
Yeah, I mean, he's lucky.
Yep.
You're right. It could have been a lot worse.
And Matt Hanone admits that a number of the security problems that made the attack possible or more possible were his own fault, like not having recent backups of all the photos and stuff on his MacBook that got erased.
Oh.
Although they'd probably be able to recover some of it or most of it, but not all of it. Not using two-factor authentication for Gmail. If he had, they may not have been able to chain all this stuff together, and they might have been stopped short sooner. And there's other services that can offer two-factor authentication, and you might want to enable that for everything you can. Also, the password he had for his Apple ID account was only 7 characters.
Right.
Now, originally he thought that's how they got in. Turns out it wasn't.
No.
So the password didn't actually factor in at all, but it was still a security failure if your password's only 7 characters long.
Yeah, and it also, again, if you're using different passwords in different services, it might slow them down too. If you're
right. And in this case, he had set his Apple ID password many years ago. Yeah. And but even many years ago, 7 characters was really not enough.
No, but that's what I was kind of talking about when I said, you sign up for a service like 7 years ago or whatever, or 6 years or whenever you signed up for it, and then they just keep adding functionality to it, like wiping your devices. When you originally signed up, you might not have thought much about it, and that's why you really have to stay on top of it. Keep your backup contact information current and keep your password current.
Yep. So Wired did some of its own tests based on the methodology. Basically, after the attack was finished, basically, the attacker sent a Twitter message to Matt's new Twitter account that he had set up in the meantime, and ended up having an IM conversation with him and kind of explaining how he pulled off the attack. And so Wired used that information and basically decided to see how easy it was to do this attack based on the steps that were laid out.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so Wired did its own tests, and using the methodology the attacker claimed to have used, they were able to completely compromise 2 other Wired employees. So just by following that same series of steps, now it was probably a little easier for them to get bits of this information, like the person's billing address, because he was sitting right there, and it's like, what's your billing address? But they managed to pull off the same attack on 2 other people. Now, when they did the Amazon thing, they didn't even use real credit cards. They just used a generator that generates a credit card number that passes the loan check.
Right.
And so, they managed to do that and gain access to the Amazon account to gain access to so on and so on.
As long as it's a number that's valid in Amazon's database, they'll reset your password. So if you get you can get a credit card added, you call back, you give them that credit card number you just generated, it's valid according to their system.
Yep. Because, maybe they don't actually track when you added that credit card. And so they don't realize that, I added that credit card 5 minutes ago and I'm now using it to verify my identity.
Oh, wow. So I'm surprised they're able to
Yep.
I guess it happened probably so soon. They attempted to do it so soon that neither company involved had time to implement employee policies to behave differently. I don't know.
Right. Now, so Apple's is still investigating, but claims that its policies weren't followed to the letter. You know, there should have been the demand for the security questions or whatever. But from the talks that Wired had with Apple support employees, it seems like normally the address and last 4 digits of the credit card are enough to reset any account.
It makes sense because they want to make it easy and a smooth process for people. They don't want to make it challenging because then people get frustrated.
In a follow-up, as of yesterday, Apple and Amazon have both stopped doing password resets over the phone until they can
get it figured out. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Who calls Amazon anyways?
Yeah, it's like, why can you even do that over the phone?
I guess I just take it. I mean, I actually shouldn't say that because it's good, right? Because like in Google, you can't call anybody when you're dealing with Google.
Yes.
So the fact that there is somebody at Amazon you can call is a good thing. I shouldn't say that.
Yes. And, you know, if this attack had happened to someone else who wasn't a reporter who knew people at Google, Twitter, and Amazon, or knew people that knew people at Google, Twitter, and Amazon, he probably would have had a lot harder time getting his account back.
Well, and it's not actually that hard. I mean, this might have already been going on, and it just might be happening to people who don't have a platform to announce to the world.
And so, you know, Apple and Amazon didn't do anything about it until the big Wired story about it.
Well, imagine if it happened to a less sophisticated user who didn't even really understand what was going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Or, you know, Matt didn't have any idea what was going on until the attacker actually explained how he did it.
Yeah.
He just assumed that they brute forced his .me account and managed to go from there.
Well, he has he has a lot of hindsight that he can go over here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now that the entire attack's been explained to him.
Well, and you don't know at first. Like it happened to our buddy Maverick and the Jupiter Force. His cryptic account got compromised, and he admitted it was a simple password. So we all just kind of shrugged it off at first, thinking, Mav's password got guessed, and somebody logged in and screwed this account. And then we realized they actually had suffered a security breach, and a lot of people had that problem. But as an end user, you don't really know at first.
Because his password was so simple, they managed to crack it with brute force, whereas my password that was more complex wasn't vulnerable.
Right. So, interesting. All right. Well, any other thoughts on the story?
Well, the whole second story is about the same thing, but different.
Yeah, actually. Well, why don't do you want to just transition right to that?
Yes.
Okay. So how does the next story sort of fit in with this one?
Well, secret questions don't work. You know, there's a number of problems with the whole idea of using secret questions. Part of it is the way it's implemented, and part of it's just the fact that any question that works well as a secret question also doesn't work well as a secret question.
Sure.
Right? So the problem with secret questions is that in order for a question to be general enough that it'll apply to most people and static enough that the answer won't change by the time you need to use the question to recover your password, means that the answers tend to be very generic and can usually be found with a bit of research.
High school mascot, town,
high school mascot's not bad, but does every high school have a mascot?
Well, but that's still not that good, because if all you gotta do is figure out somebody's high school and then Google it and you'll have it.
Well, and then the other thing is, you also have to consider who might be attacking your secret questions. Right? If the question is, what was the name of your first teacher, your first grade teacher, or something like that, well, if the person went to school with you or knows you or whatever, they would know the answer to that. Or they may be able to find it off Facebook.
And
right?
It's probably more commonly somebody that does know you.
This is Hunter's grade 1 class or whatever.
Chat room. I like the chat room's idea. Warfox says, I just never answer honestly to those questions. Of course, then the trick is you have to remember what you answered if you didn't answer honestly.
Well, for example, Bruce Schneier always just randomly pounds on his keyboard. And he said it came back to bite him one time. But when they look at the security answer and see that it's just random, they end up resetting the password for him. But the question becomes, does that mean that it's more likely that they'll do that for anybody?
Right. And of course you have to be able to call them.
Yeah.
Which like we just mentioned, is not always possible.
Yeah. So another problem is how strictly the answers that you give are verified. So basically, a common security question when calling your credit card company has always been your mother's maiden name. Now, on top of the fact that, that's not necessarily very secure, in a great deal of cases, if you just mumble something in response to that question, they'll accept it, move on, and give you access to the account. Right? Because, with people's sometimes maiden names have, people's last names weird
pronunciation, something like that. Yeah.
It's over the phone, it's cell phone, whatever. You make it sound like it broke up while you're over the cell phone. They're not going to ask you to repeat it. They're just going to continue.
Right. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
It's like, what's your mother's maiden name? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, now you want to add this credit card to your account? I can help you with that.
Well, no, this is your credit card account. You want to raise your credit limit so that I can steal more out of it?
Sure. Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Huh.
Or it's like, so you want to approve this charge for a lot of money to some, foreign ATM or something? Or whatever it is.
So in this recent scenario, a really long, complex password wouldn't have mattered because the attacker just reset his password via his support. And a security question that they didn't enforce the security question aspect of the process.
I'm not sure exactly how it worked, but maybe they asked the security question. The guy's like, "Oh, I don't remember what I put down as my answer."
Yeah, I read somewhere that they let him skip it, like that he claimed he didn't remember.
It's like, all right, well then, if you don't have the answer to that, we need this information to verify your identity.
Right, and then they went to the credit card.
That information is less secure than the secret questions.
Right,
and the secret questions aren't all that secure.
They're bad to begin with. Yeah. Now, what do you do though?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Multi-factor authentication and some other system.
The Obama administration's working on like a cyber ID act that they've been working on for years.
That means that's one thing you can take over, and then you have everything for that person.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So it comes out. What makes a good security question? Basically, there are 4 criteria, and you're trying to maximize all of them. The first is the question needs to be definitive. There needs to be only one correct answer, right? If you ask someone something where there might be 2 answers or where the answer might change over time, it's not a good question. So asking what's your favorite movie or your favorite book or your favorite food or something is a bad security question because your favorite movie will change over time, most likely.
Right. Right.
Or whatever. Or, your favorite food, you might learn to like something new or decide you don't like that anymore or whatever. It has to be applicable. The question should be possible to answer for as large a portion of your users as possible, ideally every single user. So right there, you're eliminating a lot of other questions. Like, who's your high school mascot or whatever. It's like, well, my high school didn't have a mascot. Or whatever.
I forgot because that was 20 years ago.
Yeah, right. Things like that. Memorable. The user should be able to remember the answer without having, if they forget their security answer, then, they already forgot their password, so they're already at a level where we know they're bad at remembering things. So now, and then 4, it has to be a safe answer, meaning that it's difficult for someone to guess or find through research.
Gosh, and that's a pretty tough list of criteria when you add all that up.
Right, because, it has to be memorable so that they can remember it. Applicable so that it works for everyone. And safe. It's basically you can't pull that box in all 4 directions. You're always going to have to give up some of one of those things.
I guess best case is maybe the security question could be part of an overall verification process. Like it's one step in the verifying who you are.
Now, instead of having, say, 2 specific questions, they have a list of like 20 questions, and you pick 2 that apply to you. Right? So that way they can have the applicable be a little bit wider open. So, or you can pick ones that you're going to more easily remember the answer to, or that other people will have a harder time guessing the answer to.
Yeah.
Another option is, to pick question like, what was the name of your first pet, and then lying and knowing that that's a trick question and having some answer that's not the name of your first pet, but some other answer.
Yeah. What's the name of your first pet? Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
That would work, actually. And you probably would remember that. If you made something funny to yourself, you'd probably remember it, too.
But don't be too clever because, are you going to remember that in 5 years?
Well, I love it when I'm clever, Alan. I just might.
It's like, what was the name of your first pet? Richard Stallman.
Yeah. All right. So you're not filling me with confidence here. So you're making me think that I might have to agree with the Obama administration, and we do need some sort of but password replacement system.
That's not a right solution either. We're more looking at tokens or smart cards or something, adding to something, like a password or a PIN number with something. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
So basically making everything 2 or 3 factors.
Yeah. I mean, I love that LastPass uses Google Authenticator. It just gives me a lot of peace of mind. I mean, even though I have a very long, like, sentence password, I still like the idea that you still have to have also the authentication code to get in there.
Yep. So yeah, basically, if you had some system where you had to have your password, which maybe wouldn't have to be as long and a little more memorable, on top of a security card of some kind, something, and then your cell phone gets a text message or an authenticator that has a time sensitive part to it, then you have 3 factors there.
Yeah. That seems much harder to compromise all 3 at once.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. That's. I actually.
So for a feedback question, I was like, can anybody think of a good example of security questions that would meet all 4 of those criteria?
Oh, you want people to email those in?
Yeah. So if people want to email in ideas for really good security questions, then we'll critique some of those questions on next week's episode and see if there's such thing as a good security question.
All right. So send those into TechSNAP@jupiterbroadcasting.com or use the contact us form at the top of the site. Any other thoughts on that?
Somebody in the chat room recommended a retina scanner.
I guess that's something you have.
Story we didn't cover about 2 weeks ago about somebody that was able to reverse engineer a picture of an eye and make something that would pass a retina scan.
Yeah, that's right. Gosh.
Yes.
And then people are going to go after your eye too, and that sounds like that'd be bad.
Yeah.
I'd rather they take my thumb.
Scans, not that good so far. And, the Mythbusters defeated a whole slew of fingerprint scanners.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, if you use enough of them at data centers, they're kind of wonky. They're kind of wonky.
The ones they had at our data center were really bad. Like half the time they wouldn't let me in.
Yeah.
I had to hold my finger just so every time.
Yeah, and
they got new ones that are much better.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. That would make the imaging sensors better. All right, so links to that stuff, plus Alan's broken a lot of the individual notes out in bullet points that'll be in the show notes. So if you go look for episode 70.
The Wired has a big 4-page article that has a timeline of how it happened as well.
Yeah.
It looks like once they got the information and called Apple, the whole thing was less than an hour.
That's pretty quick, really. To get a lot of access, including Whitebeater's machines. Wired did a great write-up, so people should check that out. Before we go, I would like to say hello to today's sponsor of the TechSNAP program, and that would be the GoDaddy.com, who've got a nice August offer for you. At the end of the month, it'll be all gone, so take advantage of it now. If you'd like to get 20% off of anything. What, you doing some renewals? Yeah, you buying a .com? A .me? Sure. 20% off. Just use our code GO20OFF5. Yeah, that's right.
And don't forget to grab Who Is Privacy when you register your domain.
Yeah, seriously, take advantage of the fact that you're getting 25% off with that Go20Off5 and get the privacy on there. Go for like a lot of years just so you don't have to worry about it. Just go for it. And maybe you're going to register a domain, securityquestions.com. Oh, how about this? Somebody creates some sort of website for TechSNAP audience called securityquestions.com or greatsecurityquestions.com. Got to have great in there. And then it just generates people random security answers. That'd be great. And if you do that, go to GoDaddy.com when you're checking out and use our code GO20OFF5. We've also got other great deals in the TechSNAP show notes, but thank you to GoDaddy for rocking support of the TechSNAP program. I've got myself 6 GoDaddy servers now. 6 GoDaddy servers. And you know what? It's just, I love the fact that admin panel of theirs makes it as easy to administer 2 servers as it is to do 6. And as somebody who's done many, many, many years in the server trenches, there's something extremely appealing to their very easy to use, very easy to deploy system. But also, I still feel like when you get into the nitty-gritties of their control panel, you can still do quite a bit of low-level control. And I love the GoDads, and I say thank you for supporting Jupiter Broadcasting, not just this show, but also the Linux Action Show. And thank you to everybody who uses our code GO20OFF5 when they're shopping at GoDaddy.com. Boom. All right, Alan. With all of that done, I think it means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com or using the contact form at the top of our website or submitting your question to our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. All right, Alan, are you ready for your first... Well, it's not actually a question. It's more of a success story. You ready?
Awesome.
Here we go. John writes in, and he wants to let us... He's he's heard us mention DDWRT, but he wants to share a success story with DDWRT. John writes, I've seen you guys mention it a few times here and there on the show, but you've never really gone into how exceptionally powerful DDWRT can be. In my home, we have a DSL modem connected to the incoming line from the ISP and then into our old Linksys WRT54GS. This is the one using a stock firmware, by the way. He does that for his main Wi-Fi. However, this router is in our living room, and my systems like the laptop, the desktop, the Xbox 360, a development server, and even a Western Digital TV box are not in the same room. Obviously, I couldn't just stretch a Cat5 cable through the hallway. I've been there.
Why not? Yeah. That's what I did in college.
Oh, you're a lucky man.
I used some sticky tack to make it go over the door in the kitchen so that people wouldn't trip over it.
I actually even found, I even got some little railing stuff that was meant for speaker wire for your home entertainment system. And, so that way it opened up and you could tuck the wire in there and you could clip it shut. It was nice.
A friend of mine used the Powerline Ethernet stuff for his house.
Yes, I tried that. But when you were switching between breakers or something, it didn't seem to work as well back then when I used it. He said, so he goes on to say that what he did is he took an E2000, affectionately that he's named Skynet, and he connects wirelessly to the Linksys router in the living room, allowing him to connect non-wireless devices to it with cables, essentially making multi-device wireless card. He says some of the reviews on Amazon for this E2000 are less than flattering, but it's been fine for him for a year with zero maintenance. He says it's just a taste of what DDWRT can do, but I'd love to see a segment that covers it. I might, that might be a good last topic since it's a Linux firmware, but I've done this too. He's using DDWRT to connect to another wireless network using the antennas on a wireless router and then sharing that wireless network out via the LAN ports on that little Linksys box. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Have you played much with DDWRT?
Not really. When I took my wireless classes in college, we used the Tomato firmware, which is similar, but a bit more technical than DDWRT.
Excellent. Both excellent.
Yeah. So I've never... It's like, at my house, I have a regular old Netgear wireless thing with most of the features turned off except for the wireless. And then everything runs off my BSD box. Where I manually set up DHCP and NAT and everything. Yeah. It's similar to how you would have it in pfSense. It's just rolled by hand.
I actually know, I'm probably going to get hate mail for this, but I've just had it for years. I've never had a reason to replace it. I have two Wi-Fi access points. I have one that runs on the B spectrum, or G, and that's the one that came with my Fios router. And I have like a lot of the really crappy low-end devices that connect to that. And then I have one of those Airport Extremes that we got when my wife got an iMac that has got like a hard drive in it and all that kind of stuff. I don't really use it for that, but one of the nice things it does is it'll just be a Wi-Fi AP and it'll pass DHCP and DNS through to your home server. It won't have to manage it itself, and I really like that about it.
Almost any router can do that if you just disable the DHCP server. Then,
like
if you disable the DHCP,
my home router. My home router doesn't, for example. So that's why it's on its own little private little network, and it's kind of a pain in the butt.
But no, like with my Netgear here, all I did was disable DHCP so that it would stop giving out DHCP, so that no machine would have its default gateway set to be the Netgear, so it would never end up doing any NAT or DNS or anything.
That's nice.
And then I set up my own DHCP server, and that one gives out the configuration I want.
That's what I hate about my Fios router is it has to any wireless client that uses it has to sit behind a NAT. It won't do it won't just put it as like a regular network connection. That's because
it's using its DHCP.
Yeah,
if you disable DHCP and then
it turns off wireless. It's like but that's fine. I just put it on its own wireless network. I don't care. And then people visitors come over, they connect to it, and they're not on my main LAN.
But you can do that with your DHCP if you set it up properly.
You can also
like when we had pfSense at our office, we had a guest Wi-Fi LAN that people used and so on. Then we had our LAN for our machines, a LAN for the people we shared our office space with. So they were more privileged than guests, but not as privileged as the LAN that my machine sat on. And then we had a DMZ where all the servers that were in that rack when it was in our office sat. Another interface went out to the ISP, so we had a lot
of times it's perfect for visiting like clients and things like that at a business. So you have like a salesperson that wants to stop by and give a presentation to the business. You give them their own wireless network. They can connect. You don't have to worry about it. They go right out over like say the DSL connection or something like that. It can be actually pretty nice. And then you can also do things where you have with DDWRT, where you can have, if you have two different types of antennas in one router, like if you have a 2.4 gigahertz antenna and a 5 gigahertz antenna, DDWRT can actually make those separate networks as well. So you could take like this little Linksys box that otherwise wouldn't have had more advanced functionality like that, and you can actually break those different bands off onto their own different subnets, which is neat, because then you can, on the firewall, on the DDWRT machine, you can say, all right, when people connect here, don't allow them to route into the local network, only allow them to route out to the public internet. And that's a nice little security measure. And it's essentially what I replicated here is I have on my main WAN, I have the Airport Express, which just passes DHCP from my main network server and DNS and all that kind of stuff, and it just joins the homeland. And then I have the Verizon Fios router, which just has its own little private 192 network, and it's fine too. And it works, but DDWRT, boy, if I could load that on my Fios router, I would just be able to eliminate a whole other set of gear. That would be very nice. All right, Alan, now this next email comes in from Dasani. He's in the chat room. And he says he's having some open VPN trouble, and I'm hoping maybe you can straighten him out here, okay?
A little bit.
All right, so he writes, now that all of the default VPN servers are insecure, we were talking, he's mainly referring to the PPTP stuff that's going on.
Yep.
From being dependent on recently broken MS-CHAP version 2, I'm going to switch all of my small office routers to either pfSense or Untangle, because off-the-shelf routers don't implement OpenVPN. And I could find routers with them installed at logicsupply.com. Then I actually looked at what it would take to install the client, and there are a few options that aren't very clear, and I don't know if it's secure to authenticate users against Active Directory servers or give them another set of passwords to forget once the client's installed. They have to manage their own password for the VPN. I expect it to be an extra step for everyone else, but this is quite a few more steps. Installing the client, having to have a separate password. Is all this worth it for the extra security? Thanks for your help.
Well, the first thing is you should be using whatever VPN you end up using, like OpenVPN, in certificate mode, not in username password mode. And so then it's basically just a file that goes with the config file that controls their access to the VPN rather than a password.
And then they can only log into the VPN if they've been issued a certificate by the administrator.
And you can remotely revoke that certificate at any time and a bunch of things like that.
Very nice.
But yeah, a lot of your stock routers aren't going to have any support for OpenVPN. If they can do IPsec and that's in certificate mode, that would be fine, although most of them will probably be in pre-shared key mode. And that's vulnerable to brute force attacks, but if it's just your home VPN, it's probably not that big of a deal. But yeah, OpenVPN you probably want to use in certificate mode. That's what I do. It's what they recommend in their documentation as well if you're going to have more than one user. And it's fairly easy to set up. And basically, if you give people just a file that goes with their config file, it's pretty hard for them to forget that.
He's in the chat room right now. He says, oh, neat. That's good to know.
Yeah, so basically you set it up that way. But yeah, you're pretty much looking at something like pfSense. I don't know if DDWRT really has the ability to do anything like that.
Oh, I think
a lot of it comes down to a lot of those little routers like that have very limited hardware, right? Almost no RAM and, fairly exotic processors like, ARM and so on, as opposed to a nice i386 or x64 that you can just run whatever you want on.
Yeah. pfSense, come on, let's give it a plug.
I'm running
great here.
Yeah, but I use OpenVPN just installed on top of FreeBSD from the package. I don't actually have it set up with pfSense or anything.
Sure.
But set that up, and I run it with 6 users, and it works fine.
There you go. All right, Alan. This next one's a challenge. Let's see if you've got your IPv6 foo fresh. This one comes in from Shaw, and he says, "Hi, Chris and Alan. I'm trying to set up my Hurricane Electric IPv6 certification. I'm trying to get my Hurricane Electric IPv6 certification, and I'm stuck with setting up an IPv6 email server. And see, I've never tried to do this, so this is interesting. I've configured postfix on an Ubuntu VPS with an IPv6 address, and it works well under IPv4, and as far as I've managed to Google, all the settings in postfix are correct. But when I change the INET protocol settings to IPv6, I can't retrieve my emails. I'm trying to send using Gmail, he mentions. Although sending email out seems to work fine. Hope you can help." Anything?
I'm not 100% sure, but most likely you're going to want it set up to do V4 and V6, not just V6. Part of the problem might be when you set it to V6 is that you don't have DNS over v6 set up, then you might not be able to look up the address. Although he says he can send fine, just not receive.
Could that be the sending party is having
possible.
some sort of
It's hard to say.
I'm wondering what happens like if they do a lookup on him and it resolves the IPv4 address and not his IPv6 address. Or
right.
like
So
that.
yeah, I'm guessing in his MX records he's only listing one or the other. I don't know that much about the certification. I would have almost thought that Hurricane Electric would block port 25 outbound to prevent spam over IPv6. But if they're giving you this to get your certification, then they probably wouldn't do that. And it seems he can send fine. Although I don't know that many mail servers that accept v6 mail.
Yeah, that's why I don't think I've ever really had a compelling reason to set it up, other than just testing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if anybody knows, feel free to send in a suggestion. Although you might, I'd say check the MX records, but
yeah, check your MX records, and you're also going to want to look at make sure you can do a v6 trace route to the various places. But basically your MX record will only have a host name, and so that host is going to need your quad A record, and
could be firewall level too, actually.
So what you might want to do is have at least two MX records, the higher priority one being only IPv6, and then a lower priority one with your fallback IPv4, so that you can force it to try IPv6 first.
Okay, that's a great idea.
Because if you just have a single MX record that does v4 and v6,
right,
and you disable v4 on your server, then if it tries v4 first, because that's what most things probably will do, it will end up not being able to send.
To do a separate record?
Yeah, so basically two MX records, the one with the lower priority being a lower number but means it's higher priority, being IPv6 only, and then your v4. But yeah, I think your INET protocol setting, probably you want it set so it can do v4 and v6, not just v6. Although, I don't know if the requirement for the certification means you're setting up in one specific way.
It might, that might be true. All right. Well, there you go, Alan. That's the questions. And
I haven't played with v6 as much as I'd like to.
Well, I haven't either. And it's one of those things where I've always assumed as industry demand kind of pushes me that direction, I'll just start working with it more and more, but it just hasn't really happened yet.
Yep.
I haven't really felt that pressure.
Well, I have a bunch of addresses and stuff on my servers now. I just haven't really got around to playing with them much.
Yeah. All right. Well, so you can send your questions in to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com if you've got a sysadmin type question, a networking question, a security question, or just a general tech question, and you want to hear our thoughts on it, or any feedback for the show. Feel free to include that as well. TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com, or use that contact us form, or you can submit it over at links.techsnap.tv, the show's official subreddit. But Alan, with all the emails done, it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. And welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yep, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite make it into the top of the show, but they're usually stories we still want to talk about, maybe have links you go check out from the show notes on your own accord, and they're almost always powered by our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Alan, are you ready for the first Roundup story?
Yep.
All right, here we go. It's just in the same flavor as Stuxnet and Flamer and all the other ones. A virus has been found in the Mideast that can spy on bank transactions. This is coming from Reuters, the recently hacked Reuters. A new cyber surveillance virus has been found in the Middle East that can spy on banking transactions and steal login information for social networking sites, email, and instant messaging, according to security firm Kaspersky Labs.
Yep, and this one's called Gauss, and it's based on the same framework as the Flame virus, just like how Stuxnet and Dooku were based on the same framework.
They're laughing at me, chat, for calling it Flamer. People actually called it Flamer. Yeah. That was
it's
actually
just Flame.
But
I know.
some people called it Flamer.
I know. Yeah, well, they were wrong. Doesn't mean you should repeat it.
Well, I think it's funny. It's funny.
The other interesting thing with the Gauss one is that it contains an encrypted payload that is only decrypted and deployed under certain conditions. And so we're not sure what that encrypted payload actually does yet.
Oh.
Or what triggers it.
Huh. Do we know what makes it stay in the Mideast too, and doesn't prevent it from coming over to, say, Europe?
But it may depend on how it's transmitted, or
if there's control servers again.
Again, I think imagine it's something to the fact that it's specifically targeted at places and deployed there and doesn't have its own spreading mechanism.
Ah, okay.
Relies on being spread more manually.
Because that was a reason I ask, is because both Flame and Stuxnet, a significant portion of how they were, was how they spread. I mean, that was like sort of their secret sauce. And didn't we discover with Flame after a while that there was master servers that then started turning it off?
A little bit. Stuxnet had kill code based on date.
Yeah.
And yeah, Flame had a self-destruct from a control server.
Okay. Well, there you go. All right. So the next story on the Roundup, Alan, goes to you.
Yes. A Canadian hacker won the competition at DEF CON for social engineering by duping the manager at a Walmart into giving him 75 different pieces of discrete data that would be useful in hacking into Walmart.
This is great because it was actually like a contest, right? And he's behind, if you're watching the video version, he's behind this glass booth while people are walking by. And he's on the phone and like...
he's in front of a crowd during this competition, so he's in a sound isolation booth so that the guy at the other end at Walmart doesn't hear all the people laughing at the guy at Walmart on the other end.
Right, people going by snickering that he's... Yeah, boy, that's funny.
But basically, he asked a lot of questions. Basically, he called up a Walmart store in Western Canada, pretended to be from the head office of Walmart in the States, and said that NATO was considering using Walmart as a supplier in the case of an emergency, and that if they went forward with this, it'd be a drill where a bunch of people from NATO would come into the store and try to buy a bunch of important supplies as quickly as possible. And so in order to set up for this, he needed a bunch of information. And so he went on to ask the manager of this Walmart, for things like, what's the name of the company that comes in and cleans the store after hours and stuff? What's the name of the IT company that you use? What operating system do all your computers run? What virus scanner do you use? All kinds of information that could be used to hack into it.
Give you a lot of good information from where to start.
This is the first time in the contest where someone has managed to get all 75 pieces of data.
Ah, okay.
But yes, the interesting thing is they managed to have this phone call go on for more than 20 minutes. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. How do you not know what NATO is?
All right, well, why don't we move on to a topic that everybody knows a little bit about, and that's BitTorrent throttling. You ready for this one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Torrent Freak actually has a really great write-up where they are going over a study that was conducted by a Google-funded measurement company. And here I'll give you the stats for the different countries. We just have a couple in here, and they're torrent throttling. So let's start with the U.S. BitTorrent throttling in the U.S. is not actually as prevalent as it used to be, it turns out. The main reason for this is Comcast BitTorrent blocking controversy, which was in 2007, which seems like not that long ago, but it was. The FCC eventually ruled that Comcast had to stop its targeted interference of BitTorrent traffic. As a result of this ruling, the throttling percentages took a dive from nearly 50% of BitTorrent traffic to only 3% in 2010. In the first quarter of 2012, Comcast throttling level was still only at 3%, which puts the provider among the best behaving ISPs. However, Cox is exposed in this study as the heaviest throttler of the major ISPs with 6%, which is, not bad. Why don't we move to the UK? UK BitTorrent throttling on the rise, especially among some providers. BT is the worst by limiting 65% of all BitTorrent transfers during the first months of 2012.
Yep.
The best offender is O2, which is at only 2%. You ready for Canada?
Sure.
All right. Nearly all major internet providers are heavily throttled, and Rogers tops them all. For more than half of a decade, Rogers has continuously throttled more than 3/4 of all BitTorrent traffic. 80% of Rogers BitTorrent traffic is throttled. However, TELUS rocks in at 0% is throttled. So you do have some options up there if you can get TELUS.
TELUS is mostly on the West Coast, though.
Ah, okay.
I had a nice local ISP that never did anything, but now I have Shaw, which is not as good.
Australia also, iiNet has 11% throttling, and Dodo has 0%, or D-O-D-O. I'm not sure what the Torrent Freak article has more details in there, but...
And some places in Europe have more interesting traffic shaping as well, where you have, instead of like a bandwidth cap of like 200 gigabytes or whatever, you have a cap based on... the time of day. basically during peak time, you're only allowed like 10 gigabytes a month, but during the rest overnight, you're allowed lots of bandwidth.
Okay.
And they're basically trying to shape when you use your traffic.
I think, though, it actually indicates, I hear a lot, like in the chat room, people be like, oh, I think my ISP is throttling me right now. And probably just you're having problems with your torrents, because 6% is like the highest that they found in the U.S. That's not bad. People must have gotten a little sticker shock or something when FCC went after Comcast. All right, Alan, why don't we talk about the story that was on the Telegraph? I think is interesting because the U.S. has been talking a lot about cybersecurity. Now, we talked last week, the Cybersecurity Act failed to go to a vote before recession. A recess, sorry. Recession is an entirely different problem that we have.
Yes.
And now, actually, President Obama has stated that they are considering doing some sort of level of executive order to implement a Cybersecurity Act. And I maintain that the only real true cybersecurity legislation they could pass would be to disconnect the critical systems from the internet, because anything else is really just bureaucracy that's not going to change anything.
It's security theater rather than security.
Well said, sir. Iran is taking their state computer systems off the internet to avoid a further cyber attacks. Iran will move key ministries and state bodies off the worldwide internet next month in an effort to shield them behind a secure computer wall from disruptive cyber attacks like Stuxnet and the Flame
Why
viruses.
were they ever on the internet?
Well, now, so this includes all state computers, they're saying. So they're saying one of the problems is going to be that they won't be able to go online and represent their side of the situation in an online forum, and that the Western powers will dominate the conversation now.
And, maybe they should set up something so that people can see it, but,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you have to take government, like secretaries at government offices off the internet, but I'm saying power plants and labs and
pump
stuff
controls
should not be on the internet.
Power grid things. I mean, none of it needs to be on the internet. And if you do have to have it connected, come up with something else that's not publicly accessible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. It's like, VPNs and stuff. The original internet was designed as a private network for the U.S. military.
Right.
Like,
and there's things like Internet 2 for education, right?
Yep.
Why can't there be Internet 3 for public utility back-end stuff? I don't know.
I don't know. They should have a private point-to-point network, shouldn't be using the internet at all.
There you go. All right. Well, another article from Torrent Freak. They're on fire this week. Demonoid has been busted. People might be familiar with Demonoid, the popular online torrenting site. Demonoid was busted as a gift to the United States government. I got a couple of the quick details for you. Kolocal is the largest data center in Ukraine and a place that has been Demonoid's home in recent years. But in the middle of last week, in the wake of a denial of service attack and then an immediate hack attack, government investigators arrived at Kolocal and shut Demonoid down. So the order of events was there was a denial of service attack, and then a hacker break-in occurred, and then a few days later, investigators arrived. A source inside the Interior Ministry has informed, Kozermant, I can't pronounce his name, that the raid on Demonoid was timed to coincide with the very first trip of Deputy Prime Minister Valery Kozovskorsky. I don't know, it's Ukrainian name, I'm sorry. Anyways, it was his very first trip to the United States, and the reason for his trip was copyright infringement. So the Ukraine did this kind of this bust down of Demonoid as a, here you go, United States, we're sending our representative and he's got great news for you. We've shut down the awful piracy site Demonoid.
Yeah.
There you go. I mean, what can I say? Demonoid, they were trading in pirated goods, so they probably should have been shut down. But I hate that it talks about in the article that actually, Demonoid wasn't even breaking Ukrainian law. In fact, they had blocked all Ukrainian IP addresses from even accessing their sites. And so actually, it was from international pressure from the United States that they even did this in the first place. And
that's an interesting way to try to skirt laws. Go to a country, block everything in that country so you can't be violating that country's laws, and then set up for every other country.
Yeah.
Then if you were to do that in a second country, block that local one, and then cover the first country, but from servers in the second country.
But they'll still get you because you're using the transit wires that are in the ground in their country or something. They'll come up with some sort of telecommunications violation thing or something.
Yeah, but once it goes onto the backbone, that's not my traffic anymore. That's, level 3's traffic or whatever.
Yeah. All
interesting anyway, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure,
it's really not the U.S. government's place to be enforcing
we apparently
this
are the
necessarily.
copyright infringement police around the world now.
Yeah.
And I guess they actually haven't found the admins of Demonoid yet. They're on the run or whatever. But I did mention earlier, just a few minutes ago, that Reuters was hacked recently, and that's the next story in the roundup.
Yes.
You ready for that one?
It's next 2 stories, actually.
Yeah. Fake news was even posted on the Reuters site. Their blogging platform was compromised, and fabricated blog posts were
Yes,
posted.
in fact, it was a fake interview with a Syrian rebel leader.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which side it was angled from, but
The Syrian rebels said that it was the Assad regime that led the attack and was posting bad things. So I'm guessing.
yes, it said here a phony interview with the leader of the Free Syrian Army,
Yeah.
who apparently said his forces were pulling back from a northern province after repeated battles with the Syrian army, and so it seems that may have actually been attempt to demoralize the rebels.
There you go. And then also probably very much related to the same attack, Reuters' Twitter account was also compromised a couple of days later.
Now, there it may have been possible that some blogging platforms tie into your Twitter account so they can auto-post when you post a new post.
Sure.
And so by compromising the blog, they may have actually got the OAuth keys required to make posts to the Twitter account without actually ever having the password to the Twitter account.
So they got the blogging platform on Friday, and then they got the Twitter account on Sunday, but they might have had it during that time and just decided not to.
Or just not realize they had it, right? If you break into the blogging platform and download a copy of it, they take the platform offline to fix it, you can still poke around in the files that you had access to.
Yeah. All right, interesting. And we've also talked about how these news websites are going to become targets of attackers who just simply want to spread misinformation. I mean, we've talked about that on this show several times.
Yes, it was like one of the very first things we ever talked about.
Yeah.
Was, because the other scary thing is if you say hack Reuters blogging platform there, post drive-by download malware there, right? So that every person that visits that site gets hit with a security vulnerability, like a zero-day exploit in Flash or Java or anything. Or, especially if they find one that happens in a specific browser.
And imagine how many Reuters visitors probably have like one version or two versions behind a Flash. Probably a huge percentage.
Yep. Well, and again, if it's a zero-day exploit, there's no newer version of Flash out yet.
True. But even like when you look at like the Jupiter Broadcasting Flash stats of an audience who's technically savvy, the majority is usually one revision behind. Just one, and that's all it takes.
Well, sometimes the revisions come pretty quick, too.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. So, all right, should we talk about this Amazon story, sort of a follow-up to the top story we had this week?
Yeah, I actually stuck that in at the top, not realizing it was the same story, but yes.
Well, so essentially Amazon, I guess this is sort of official, making it official, Amazon has quietly closed the security hole that the attackers used to get access to the journalist's account. So Amazon's at least taking steps. I got to imagine Apple's
Amazon
take some
it was a follow-up at the very end of the story that Amazon and Apple both no longer allow password resets over the phone, at least temporarily.
Yeah, and we have Amazon's right above it and sort of their reasons for going forward with it and all that stuff in this Wired article. You guys can check that out. But just so you know that Amazon has taken care of that, and rightfully so. I'm a huge Amazon fan, and it's good to see them being as reactive as possible. Maybe next time this won't happen. We'll see. All right, Alan. Well, I think that's the whole show, right? Yeah? Before we get out of here, we should remind people of two very important things about the TechSNAP program. Number one is we're live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
And you can catch us at jblive.tv if you want to watch the video version, or go over to jblive.info where we have high and low fidelity streams of audio available for you, as well as an embedded HTML5 audio player if your browser has the MP3 codec, and a small little embed of the next few hours worth of programming on the radio stream. We're going to be revamping this page at some point, but we have a 24/7 radio stream that's either filled with music, our live productions, the back catalog, or a bunch of awesome partner content of hand-selected shows that are really good. And you can find that, and it's going 24/7 over jblive.info. Just an awesome radio stream you can tune into to catch these shows live or other things that are on there when we're not live. All right, Alan. Well, that's episode 70 right there. Thank you, sir, for a great show. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll be right back here next week.